Bueno, perfecto. Entonces, yo voy a hacer una introducción y así después vos empezás con el seminario. ¿Está bien, Horacio?
Sí, pero en inglés, porque yo en español esto no lo puedo hacer.
Inglés, sí, ahora movemos al inglés tucumano.
No.
Así que...
No, si alguien quiere preguntar en español, no hay problema, pero sí.
No, este es el inglés, es el idioma del seminario.
Okay.
Pero,
Super.
Okay, so, well, welcome everybody. We are very happy today of having a new JiLAEE seminar. We are very happy today to have Horacio Larreguy. First, I would like to let you know that this is our last seminar of the first semester. So we have a great close of the first semester, and we will return with the seminars in the spring of Argentina, the fall of North America. So we will be back at that time. Horacio Larreguy is an associate professor of economics and political science at the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México, ITAM, in Mexico City. He was an assistant and associate professor of government at Harvard University until June 2021. He has been a visiting researcher at the Toulouse School of Economics and the Institute for Advanced Study in Toulouse, where he will remain until June 2022. Horacio received a PhD in economics from MIT in 2013, a master in economics and finance from CENFI in 2007, and a BA in economics from the University of Buenos Aires, from la Universidad de Buenos Aires, la UBA. His research interests include political economy and development economics, using both theory and empirics. He has worked in political accountability and both behavior in Africa and Latin America. In particular, he has worked on clientelism and vote buying, the importance of information for political accountability, whether education fosters political participation, and whenever possible, the relevance of social networks for these and other development issues. More recently, motivated by the COVID-19 epidemic, he's working on various projects, one of which he will present today, on misinformation in Bolivia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, together with Africa Check, Chequea Bolivia, Cubatana, and Internews. Today, he will present Can Social and Traditional Media Campaigns Empower Women Subjected to Gender-Based Violence amid COVID-19? So thank you again, Horacio. We are very happy to have you today. And again, like usual in the seminar, anyone can interrupt to make questions. The idea is to have a good exchange of ideas. So, okay, so the room is yours, Horacio, and thank you again for being here.
Well, first, thanks a lot for having me here. As clearly from the intro, like this is like not my area of expertise, and so this is a project that was motivated by COVID. So, and I think this is the second time I'm presenting this. So we're really looking forward to getting some feedback and more generally, sort of any ideas that you have on this topic. I think it's like pretty relevant. I'm happy to do more on this. So, so any thoughts you might have, like feel free to jump in. This is John working for Tini Cristia at MIT and Beef Parker at Magyara, also at MIT, and Norhan Muhab, who at the time of the project, she was working at JPAL. Now she's in the private sector. And the motivation of this paper, which is also relevant and actually very relevant for Latin America, I started thinking about this while reading something about Mexico, is COVID-19 has really increased the extent and risk of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence, particularly in the global south. And so I think that's a very pressing problem, and essentially like due to all the lockdown restrictions and limited so interaction, you have households couples now at home and essentially like the whole household at home, and together with the added financial stress that you have from the deteriorating economy, essentially this creates like a horrible situation for women. So the story basically is what to do about it. And there's been work before COVID, of course, on this issue, and which is very important. And mostly of these interventions are sort of what I call like edutainment interventions, essentially trying to have like small TV shows or broadcastings in villages. It's sort of trying to empower women, and through two main mechanisms. And sort of the first one is try to have like a attitudinal change, which I'll discuss later. Is actually pretty hard. And the other one is sort of increase reporting. Essentially provide resources for women, so actually they feel that they can have someone that actually wants to listen to what they have to say, and it's not, they want to keep them quiet and support them. The problem, though, essentially is that most of these interventions, as you might imagine, actually have been in person, and as I'll discuss briefly, like most of them actually have in order to work, they don't always work, and in general, when they do work, it's because I have a communal component. Essentially, to change attitudes is very hard to do. It kind of impartial equilibrium. You're gonna have to change essentially kind of the whole village way of thinking about the problem. And essentially, you cannot just do it sort of in person and in private. And again, we have the problem that we have social distancing and mobility restrictions that really make it unfeasible. To implement what we think the way what we learned so far that is the most successful way of implementing these interventions. So essentially, it's been for us was a call for sort of thinking of an alternative way to actually disseminate this way of this type of information for women. Yeah, England?
Yeah, just maybe you're gonna get to that, but I'm wondering, is there any evidence that some of these empowerment strategies actually can backfire, especially if you don't have good law enforcement? I can imagine that women stand up more to men, and then this causes more conflict.
Yeah, so let me get to the literature, and we can discuss. So that I'll touch a little bit on that if I don't. Get back to me. So as I was saying, we have this problem that kind of what been shown to be most effective. It's actually pretty impossible to implement, or was pretty impossible to implement. Because of the old restrictions on social mobility. But at the same time, actually, like what was inspiring for us is that because of COVID, there's been a surge in the use of social media. So people are home, and especially in developing countries, there's been in the last decade a significant advance in digital communication technology. So essentially, people are going to be sort of online. And so the question sort of that we try to address in this paper is that can actually sort of implement these edutainment interventions through social media and also traditional media. We'll see, we're going to look at competing ways of doing it to actually sort of empower women against gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. Jared.
You have a quick question on the literature. So is there?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are there interventions that try to change through edutainment the behavior of men instead of the reporting of women? So affecting that side versus the women's side, and why you would think that doing it for women in the case of COVID would be better than sort of addressing the likelihood of committing violence by men.
Yeah, so I'll discuss this in a second, like most of the give me one second, essentially, but just to answer briefly this, most of the edutainment interventions that actually are implemented in general and have this communal aspect is really about kind of involving men. Like to my understanding, like you don't have basically just targeting men alone. It's much more of a community event when it comes to gender-based violence. So I also know a separate literature which is very related on gender, on women mobilization, because of low turnout in similar contexts. Usually husbands don't allow them to go and vote, and the few experiments you have on that actually show that the most effective thing to do is actually to involve men. So in that sense, that's the case. I'm not aware of interventions on this just basically involving men. But again, I'm not like entire expert. Yeah. So let me talk briefly about the literature, to position. I don't tend to do this, and so I tend to jump straight. But I think it's important to kind of have a sense of the literature, and especially given a lot of these questions before jumping into what we did. Essentially, I there's a lot of work on, of course, pointing out that this is a widespread problem, and as many economists care about welfare, and so they point out that it has a welfare consequences. But in general, I think that this is just disgusting, and clearly like women that suffer it like really suffer disability from it, and this is very important in the global south, and in particular in the MENA region, where we're going to be focusing in the case of Egypt. And so the way that edutainment interventions is going to work essentially is that you tend to have some sort of role model, like talking about problems, which is exactly what we're going to have, as you see in a second, and really trying to point out that there is scope to change behavior, so that the right try to condemn this behavior, and importantly, they also try to provide resources for women and try to lessen the fear of reporting, because normally that's and importantly in the literature, and we'll be guided by this, is like the main outcome is really has to do with women's willingness to report, because that's an important sort of constraint that you tend to find out in this context. And so that's pretty much what we have. And so now we're going back to a question. Essentially, like to my knowledge, there's nothing on backfiring. But it is the case though that is this problem, and like this kind of like usually you work in partial equilibrium, and as you'll see in our results, like that I'll preview in a second, like essentially like it's a lot easier to get people to report, say, to NGOs, but they're not willing to report to, say, the police or more traditional institutions. And so I think this is exactly, and this is what we're gonna actually find also in our context, and sort of, and so this is very consistent with the fact that like you have like a sort of supra institutions, like above the village, and so and they're actually not affected by intervention, and sort of, and people just know that they have this false belief that like everything's gonna change because I got this like inspirational speech. So in that sense, that sort of you don't see that, but people are pretty. I think that the fact that you don't have the backfiring, and it's because of this. And also in our case, we're not gonna see any like crowding out, at least, sort of, which would also be another possibility. So in general, so what you have two main type of findings out there, which is essentially like mostly community transmitted interventions, and think of like having a like small TV show and like having a community event where you put a screen and you broadcast this you screen this in a village. That's the type of things that have been shown to be most effective. And the whole point is that it's like this journalist discussion, it's like an important event, and it's really like the fact that it's like a communal thing. And not only women got the information, but also they know that other people in the village got exposed information, seems to be sort of what's most effective to kind of have a bit of a change in attitudes. You also have some other sort of work that actually shows that there is no effect on no shift on attitudes, but actually you do have that, now that women learn about these resources, even though they don't expect people to change their attitudes, they actually do change the increased reporting of existing levels of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And you see that, our results are going to be fairly closely aligned to kind of what the main findings of this kind of more in-person type literature. So in order to tackle this, essentially, we're going to partner with a very well-established Egyptian women's rights organization, which is
Horacio?
Yeah, Julia.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a question. So the main correlate of, I am not saying that these are causal, but do we know whether the main correlate of violence against women are drinking, having drugs? Because I am thinking like in a rational model, well, again, the drinking, has some benefits, but the cost is again that people may have problems with their family, damage their kids, their children, and so on, and the same with drugs. So what fraction, and do you account for that in the study?
I'll tell you, so we're gonna have, this is an RCT, essentially, you'll see like what we're gonna randomize, and in the sense like and things are by construction balanced. So in the sense that we're gonna be dealing with it. So we didn't quite, but I can tell you correlates that we have a baseline, actually I don't have in this talk, but essentially we focused on sources of financial stress and the extent to which, husbands and and more generally older male are in the household, and that heavily correlates with violence. And you see in a second though that we have a pretty, so the way, I'll discuss in a second like recruitment, but essentially like the type of women that we have interested in this type of intervention actually are women that at baseline are suffering very high levels of violence. So as you'll see in a second, but essentially like, so we don't have any, so actually I do know a study trying to deal with alcohol problems. And I'm not sure what like but I don't think it's an outcome. I'll get back to you. So I don't think they look into it as an outcome, sort of like domestic violence. But yeah, that's an important. I mean, anyway, that's not what we randomize, or essentially that's not the point of our evaluation. But it certainly is something that it's worth thinking about it. The other one, obviously, that has been done is really like sort of financial situation and sort of, and of course, and if you give sort of conditional or unconditional cash transfers to these households, essentially you do see that there's less stress over financial issues, and that lessens the extent of violence. But yeah. But we didn't. I mean, hopefully, I'm thinking in the future, trying to combine this type of intervention that I'll discuss in a second with sort of cash transfers, and that might be a much more powerful way to tackle the problem. Although we didn't have the funding to do that in this case. But let me tell you a little bit. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit what we did, and so we partnered with this organization. At the end of the day, like the crucial person is like we have Nihal, which is this very famous local journalist in Egypt, who has this organization, the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights, and essentially it's so to bear in mind why we decided to evaluate what we're evaluating. She was, prior to the intervention, she was doing two main things. She had a TV show on gender issues, and she was very active on social media and like posting a lot of sort of like videos trying to sort of along the lines of what we're gonna disseminate, trying to kind of empower women, telling them about their rights, essentially sort of like and which things I will discuss in a second. So the idea here essentially was like, can we systematically analyze the effect of these and really like kind of like really like boost this type of activities are like right sort of at the beginning of COVID. So what we're going to do is that we're going to evaluate the impact of their TV show and what we call the "You're Not Alone" social media campaign on a series of outcomes. And I'll discuss in a second what exact content of these things. But essentially, like we're going to just to preview things, we're going to focus on whether actually this information gets consumed, which is essentially whether we have a first stage, and so do people actually learn about the information that we provide to them. And importantly, we're going to have different, as I'll discuss in a second, different ways of disseminating information. So we're also trying to analyze the relative effectiveness of these different methods, essentially like traditional ways like TV or different ways of social media, Facebook versus WhatsApp groups. And importantly, as obviously sort of in line with the literature I just discussed, we're going to be focusing on whether we actually have attitudinal change towards sort of gender, marital equality, and sexual violence. And we're going to get at so whether they hypothetically would actually use this type of resources in case they will recommend someone that they know to be affected by like gender-based violence or sexual harassment or violence. And also importantly, we're actually check whether themselves have actually used these resources in the past. So essentially, this is our main behavioral outcome. And also importantly, we're going to check whether like we change kind of the views they have about women in the future. So we expected that it might be that you cannot change the actual attitudes that people might have, but once you empower women through accessing resources, they might actually have like think that like maybe things are changing are for better. And I'll discuss it in a second. The context, it was a context of kind of like the Egyptian Me Too. So to preview the results, so for us it was a big plus that we actually managed to get Takeup. And imagine this is a context where like people are a lot on social media, so it's not really obvious that people are going to pay attention to this information on treatment. In terms of which like treatment was most effective, we're going to see that Facebook actually is not very good to deliver this type of information. And as I mentioned, we play with like different ways of doing it. WhatsApp in the individual level, like WhatsApp or WhatsApp groups, and I'll discuss why. But essentially, we're trying to generate this kind of communal experience in WhatsApp groups, and we were not really able to generate this. So essentially, we don't really have differences between kind of WhatsApp individual and WhatsApp groups. But importantly, like ultimately, what we do manage to get is that this increased consumption of the information that we provide them. They do learn that there are resources online for women and organizations that they can actually contact them. We're not going to see any change in attitudes, and it's impressive. So we have a variety of different levels of attitudes. Like we have precise zeros across the board. But we do have an increase sort of both hypothetical and actual increase of use of resources. And so there's no like changing the levels of reporting violence they suffer, but they do have a significant increase in the use of resources to actually sort of contact, so like go online, look at the resources for women, and actually like reaching out to these type of organizations. And ultimately, this actually leads to like better views about like sort of kind of the future outlook, so not huge effects on that on the last one, but essentially like overall, women are more positive about the future ahead. So let me tell you a little bit about the context and the specific intervention, unless you have any questions.
Horacio?
Yeah.
I have a short question. So
Please.
do you have a sense of what to expect? So for example, this is evaluating whether this is a good or a bad campaign, because you could also find that it was a negative, no?
Yeah, so we have.
Did you have a benchmark?
So we have
work in another place.
So the way this is why I started. Like I usually don't do this, and sort of in this particular case, because I cannot know the literature in this particular case, I did like a bit of an internal meta-analysis to try to understand, and this is kind of what I try to summarize this without sort of annoying you too much on lots of details. But this is pretty much like the takeaway of the literature, and sort of and we did pre-register. So everything essentially the way it works is that we run the campaign, sort of, and then we kind of have a pre-registration. Essentially, we say, look, these are our hypotheses. And I'll explain you essentially what. And so the only thing here that we did register that we were hoping to change was essentially a change in attitudes, but everything else you see here, we pre-registered that that's what we expected. And so in that sense, essentially, like this is not so much. It's not like a great, theoretical or new policy contribution. It's much more about sort of like trying to see like even what we know now that you change the context and we cannot implement what we knew that somehow worked in certain contexts, and we actually implement this through online and kind of what's the optimal way of doing it. That's pretty much what we try to do, just to be fair. So in the sense, like it's not like a great theoretical contribution. It's much more like pure policy. Like, can we help women over the internet because they really need it, and sort of and the way we used to know how to help them, like it's no longer feasible. So a bit on the context, like you can imagine, sort of Egypt and Arab countries, so you have lots of social and economic inequalities in this context. Egypt ranks 134th out of 153 countries in the 2020 Global Gender Gap Index. That includes sort of like labor outcomes, educational outcomes, health outcomes, and political outcomes. Female labor for participation is less than 25%. From DHA's data, you have 36 of women that are married sort of reporting domestic violence. 92% of them report actually have undergone female genital cutting, which is illegal in this context. And close to 100% of women have said that they've experienced sexual harassment in one form or another. So this is a pretty bad context. That said, the hope that the bit of light that we saw sort of at the end of the tunnel is essentially is that at the time of this, there was a bit of Egyptian Me Too, and essentially there's like a famous, the son of a famous person in a private university who sexually harassed someone, and that came out alive, sort of, and so there was a hope that essentially like this could start the Egyptian Me Too, and unfortunately like it calmed down pretty quickly, but essentially this is kind of like context of the intervention, and also importantly it's a context where you have a fairly large Facebook and WhatsApp penetration, sort of out of a population of 100 million, sort of like you have like 38 million people on Facebook and 24 million on WhatsApp. So that essentially it's like provides a lot of potential to use these modes of information dissemination for our purposes. So how do we evaluate the effectiveness of these things? And sort of course you cannot just post something on Facebook. That's just not gonna do it. So the way we do is when I recruit women for a baseline survey, so we're roughly paying them a little less than $2 to answer a baseline survey, and sort of we do explain to them that this is part of an evaluation of what this sort of institution is doing. And this is basically like this is NIHAD, sort of like so inviting them to answer this survey about these issues. We roughly survey 10,000 women. And at the end of the survey, essentially we offer them to sign up to receive sort of additional information about these issues. So they didn't actually know that they were engaging in intervention. So this only happens at the very end of the survey. And so this is kind of how we recruit them. And in general, it's pretty important, in my experience, in this type of context, that you do have some local organization kind of supporting this. Otherwise, it's pretty hard to recruit people. It varies by countries, but it's like. I think this is pretty helpful. So if you might wonder, what's the type of women, and importantly, we just recruit women. I'll explain you why in a second. So this goes back to the question that I think Jared asked. But you might wonder, what type of sample are you getting out of this? And sort of in order to look into that, essentially, these are the cohorts we have that we can also have. We also have in the Arab Barometer, which is a national representative sample. And essentially, what you see is that if you don't restrict the data to women with internet usage, you have essentially we're going to have a much younger, more educated sort of type of sample. Once you do restrict essentially to people that have internet access, you have a very fairly comparable sample in terms of age, educational level, social status, and so forth. And although it's not a perfect balance, so actually later on I'll get back to this. We're going to look at heterogeneous effects by this type of cohort to try to understand essentially how to extrapolate from our sample to the more general population. But in particular, sort of our point here is basically really to look at the effectiveness of this type of information for the sample that's interested in consuming it. So in that sense, we do think that this is internally relevant. So the treatment assignments, so essentially out of these roughly 5,800, we assign 5,600 to different treatment arms. The difference is essentially that some people try, since we're getting paid, some women try to respond things more than twice, and so we didn't want to have people that were not generally interested, and so they were more about making money out of this. And essentially we randomly assigned them to 5 different treatment arms. The one treatment arm essentially were people that were getting messages delivered via WhatsApp. And just themselves. Another arm where essentially women getting videos, these messages delivered instead through WhatsApp groups that we set up, and I'll explain later how we do it. And the other essentially were women actually that we got the information through their Facebook messaging app. And then and this is that's the social media, the 3 ways we evaluated. Disseminating these videos with this information. I'll discuss briefly, shortly. And then the alternative, essentially, what we try to do is basically is try to compare the relative effectiveness of social media with traditional media, which in this particular case, it was the TV show that happened at the exact same time that we ran this intervention, with very similar, also produced by Nihat, so she was the main person speaking in the TV show. And the way we try to increase TV show consumption, of course, it was by sending sort of regular reminders about the time and the channel of the TV show. And of course, we also had a control group. And in this particular case, since we wanted everybody to access the information eventually, we didn't want to exclude anyone. So we actually sent the control groups all the information of the videos at the very end of the intervention. And so in terms of how much content this was, essentially the individuals that received sort of messages, they got links to 13 videos that I'll discuss the content in a second. And those who were assigned to the TV show, essentially we started a little bit because of IRB problems in terms of reminders of the TV show that started 3 weeks in advance. But essentially we send them 8 reminders of TV shows that were TV show episodes that were happening ahead. And also we send them a set of videos of the 3 past TV shows that they missed at the very beginning when we sort of introduced them into the fact that we want to start sending them reminders to so they can have access to the TV shows. And this is run essentially over an 8-week period between July and September 2020. So this is really sort of at the peak of COVID, the first wave of COVID in Egypt. And in general, essentially, the type of treatments is like Nihat, she's sitting down in her living room, just literally talking about different topics, and sort of. But if you look at the TV show, and I should have a video of that, it's pretty similar, sort of. And I think she's just sitting in a TV studio, just talking to women about these issues. Anyway, yeah.
So I was curious, what were you trying to achieve with individual versus groups? Were you trying to manipulate beliefs that people were watching this?
Yeah. So admittedly, this is a week treatment, but essentially, the point here was the following: most of what was shown to be successful, in quote unquote real life, sort of in person. So for this, it was this kind of communal type ways of distributing information. And of course, I honestly, I think that the reason why this worked is much more about the discussion, just knowing that other people in the community that they would potentially interact sort of after the information delivery would have the information, they kind of felt more supported, and that's why they could speak up and report more. Here, of course, you can't do that, and also in the sense that we randomly match them with other people that they don't know, and so they don't know the identity. And but essentially, the idea is that, and I'll show you some results on this. We're trying to generate kind of the type of discussions you generate in a public setting, also kind of within the WhatsApp groups. And the idea is that, can people talk with each other and kind of feel more supported, even sort of over social media, and sort of maybe we were hoping that if we can generate a little bit of that, we generate more sort of information internalization and potential use of resources. And I can anticipate you that that was not the case. But that's sort of like it's actually, if you have better ideas on how to do this, like sort of
no, but the related mechanism I had in mind, and I mean there is also like a JP paper that's a bit of that. From Ricardo, there's like the one non-charitable giving, I think, for voting for parties, is people all of a sudden might think that like more of their neighborhoods are like more people are exposed to this kind of intervention, and so like sort of like this might shift the perception of how norms are going to change, which is great. But that is a mechanism that's potentially powerful, but may not be in place in a setting in which currently there is a Me Too kind of like vibe, right? Where like it's big on social media. There's this perception like people are talking about this issue, right?
Yeah. So I have a paper precisely on randomizing saturation, sort of on Facebook, precisely to try to essentially change people's perceptions about like sort of how many other people are also getting the information. So and we have sort of a bit of this, and actually originally writing the Pinas's plan, it was heavily on that. In general, though, the issue here is that people that also got the information, essentially, since everybody got recruited the same way, right? Essentially, we're gonna drop that angle, and essentially, I think that this might be happening, and this might be sort of part of the effects, because people do like across the board, those that get it on WhatsApp groups, individual, or even Facebook, like so they all got recruited the same way. So it might be that a part of what's going on, or why it drives this effect, is that people think that they're not alone. And actually, that's the name of the campaign, sort of in Arabic, sort of like, and
But you have an on, so like I think what. Sorry. Okay,
let me finish. So you might still get a partial derivative, so that this effect is bigger in WhatsApp groups. And so we have a bit of a discussion over that in the Pinas's plan, but sort of, and you see in a second, sort of like we failed. Potentially this could have been, but I think we failed miserably at sort of generating that type of dynamics. Yeah.
But I think it would still be interesting if you do have belief data on like perceptions that like other people have exposure to this.
It really hurts that you ask these questions, because I obviously have that question in the Facebook paper, but we did not ask that question in the sample, and somehow like we had to put it together very quickly, and we did not ask about like beliefs about other people also getting the information. Yeah.
Because I would have loved to see a ceiling effect there, like to sort of justify why this mechanism is down. Okay, but
no, and no, unfortunately we don't have that. Yeah. That's a good point. And so in general, though, I mean, I think that this is not a great way to generate community effects, as you'll see in a second. And so I'm actually pretty open. I think that it's a big area if we can find. And it's funny, like I even started going into blogs of like kind of policy development people that are trying to like get into these things, and unfortunately no one has better answers so far. At least I have not been able to look in the discussion. So I do think it's an area where if we could make some like there's room for like a very easy breakthrough. I mean, although like we could not come up with something better than this. Yeah. So importantly, so we're randomly assigning these like 5,600 women to different type of groups. This is a tricky technical thing, which is essentially like, even though we ask them to all of them, they provide their Facebook accounts and to follow our business account for the project, like we do not match them all. So essentially we're gonna have two batches of for the blog randomization. One essentially were like for those that we were able to identify Facebook accounts, and those get sort of randomly assigned to control Facebook and getting sort of individual level WhatsApp. And for those that we cannot find their Facebook accounts, essentially we have blogs where we have like I assign to control, WhatsApp individual, WhatsApp groups, or the TV show reminder. And here the blogs are bigger. Essentially we need like 10 people sort of in the WhatsApp groups to have like some minimum number. Anyway, this is just technicality, but we're gonna have blogs fixed effects, so we're gonna only identify a variation within these blocks. So what's the treatment content? So originally, like the ways when we started talking to Nihat, it was just gonna be about like COVID, obviously, and sort of like gender-based violence and sort of intimate violence within the households. Over time, but she had like essentially like a total freedom to do whatever she wanted. And over time, as I mentioned, this kind of Me Too, like Chief Me Too started, and sort of sexual harassment started being a big issue. So in terms of what we covered in the videos like COVID-19, domestic violence, lots of legal issues about sort of the extent to which women are protected by law in terms of sexual harassment and how people should act around these things. Also at work, and see what more generally like men could do to stand against violence, and also importantly, like it's a tricky environment for Nihat to say all these things, especially we have a lot of people that are very conservative. So for them to actually be open, there was also a bit of a balance between these kind of more hot topics and the general issue of how to violence sort of like work and home for women, and where she did not take this strong thing of like, women should go out and forget about the family and everything. So in this society, that just doesn't work out. But essentially, she tried to navigate all these issues, essentially trying to push for like more open-minded households regarding these issues. And importantly, like this very similar content was disseminated both in videos and over social media and the TV show. And so we asked her to have consistency on that. And what is crucial is that something that was very important for us is that she was constantly reminding women about the existence of these different online places where to access information about the rights and sort of to ask for support, and of course, a hotline for her organization where people could reach out. Ideally, we try to get actually the phone numbers to match them of the people calling to the hotline. So later on, we actually had some legal issues, and so we were not able to do it. But we still have sort of like good measures on reporting that I'll show you later. So that's pretty much kind of the type of content, and this is basically how things are delivered. Essentially, we send them a link to a server that we're hosting, and sort of with different videos over time, and always with a catchy question, trying to for women to actually try to look into the videos and get a sense of what we're trying to get at. Yeah.
You can ask a boring question. So was it you sending these messages? Maybe you said it, I missed it. Or was it friends sending this message? Because one thing I don't understand, was it you sending these messages or was it friends? Because I mean, there is a small challenge.
Yeah. This is very important. Essentially, like, that so in that sense, like, it's like they're subscribed to get these messages. So it's actually very, very tricky. We discussed earlier today about using like the chatbot, the WhatsApp chatbot to communicate this information. This was a way that potentially we would have done it. So in this particular case, the way we managed to deliver this thing was basically through WhatsApp lists. And so we had 6 different phone numbers for the project for different providers. And so in order to sign up, in order to get these messages, essentially they had to send a message to the phone and add that in the contact list, so as we could send them through via WhatsApp list the information. Yeah.
But so on the WhatsApp list, you don't have the constraints that you can only send media content if people give you a response, and like then within 24 hours, can you just send? Well,
I think, but that's exactly what happened. So the way it worked is that, so the way we kind of operate this is that, in order, it's very tricky. So essentially the way we work is that we try to generate like 2-way communication with people before we started doing this. And the way we did it was very inefficient in terms of like the human resources that we needed. Essentially what happens is that in order to pay them for their baseline completion, we send them pictures of phone cards. So essentially they had to send us a message saying, I completed the survey, I want to register or not, and I want to get paid. And sort of we would send them the information. There was a back and forth. Of course, that requires like roughly 10 messages with our arrays for like roughly a sample of 10,000. So I'm not gonna say that it's like highly recommended, But by generating this type of information flow, we managed to make sure that, then they would get the information. And we checked essentially whether we're getting the 2 clicks and sort of yeah. So it's a very, very costly way of doing it. Now with a chatbot, you can do it much easier. But yeah, that's a very important way. So I can tell you, I have other projects where we were not able to do that, and indeed you have a big dropout, like first-rate dropout, because of this. Yeah. But not this case. Yeah. So so let me open the window because it's like I had to close the kitchen door because the kids are with the TV and I'm like super hot in here. 1 second. So so first I'm gonna show you a little bit of a preview on kind of on the take-up and sort of and the interest of this treatment and importantly how this differ across modes of dissemination. Essentially here, we don't have this for TV, we have it for social media, but essentially the key thing here is that since we had our own server where we hosted all these videos, we actually have and also and which were relating to YouTube videos, we have all the metrics from the server and the YouTube the viewership numbers. In general, there was a moderate take-up. Essentially, we have roughly on average 3 unique views of videos per person. So that's pretty good. It's sort of roughly a quarter. And something important is that Facebook is bad for 2 things. The first thing is that suddenly Facebook decided to block our page halfway through the experiment. And so essentially we had no way to communicate further with these people. So we had to move all of them to the WhatsApp individual treatment. But the advantage actually is that we can conduct a difference in difference strategy, as you'll see in a second, to actually get at the relative effectiveness of Facebook in order to generate viewerships. Actually, in a certain way, we were lucky that we could stop Facebook halfway through and move them to individual WhatsApp because it's a much more effective way to do it. There, it's tricky and sort of in terms of why is that we generate lower interest or just it's just the technology, the Facebook technology is worse at this. And actually here, so I'm on point, it's very important. So in order to precisely because you can only target information to people that have talked to you over the Facebook chat within 24 hours. So the way that Facebook forces you to reach out people that have not done this is by actually posting advertising. So the same way I can actually sort of advertise Facebook ads on the Facebook feed, you can do the same thing for people that are actually connected to your business page and send them that type of information sort of individually. But the problem is that 100% of them actually get it. And so it's mechanically, just because you're forced to using this particular targeting technology, you lose a lot of people. Anyway, too much information, but as you'll see in a second, it is not the way to go. As I anticipated, essentially WhatsApp groups actually not a great way to generate social interaction from that. So this is roughly kind of the histogram of web page visited, and you get several similar numbers if you look at our server or the YouTube views. And then, as I was mentioning, essentially, then you can actually split this so by week and by Facebook and WhatsApp individual, which is kind of the closest that we get. Essentially, what you see over here, essentially, is that you're gonna get a much higher much lower interest in Facebook as opposed to WhatsApp individual. This is when we moved everybody to individual. So you want to do the different plot. Essentially, you want to take the difference between sort of the Facebook and WhatsApp individual prior and after. You see that they get equalized, and Facebook is a lot smaller below. So essentially, looking at the numbers, you roughly have slightly less than a 0.2 kind of per capita person less interested, so consuming the Facebook, the videos that get through Facebook as opposed to WhatsApp. So clearly, the WhatsApp way of disseminating information is much better for people to actually go and access the server with the videos. So that's sort of an important sort of takeaway. Although given that we lost the sample, initially with the end line that we have basically is going to be just pulling Facebook and WhatsApp individual. So we don't have different reduced form estimates for Facebook and WhatsApp individual, because most of the sample Facebook's originally assigned sample to Facebook got treated through WhatsApp. And then as I mentioned, essentially the WhatsApp groups were terrible. Essentially we had 200 WhatsApp groups. Essentially in more than half there was no conversation, and 69 of them sort of there's one person sort of replying a little bit about it and sort of discussing the information. we only managed to get sort of the active, what we're hoping for, the active conversation in less than 10% like of the cases. But importantly, like there were no, so one of the big fears, and this is actually get to why we excluded men from the sample. We're very concerned about like negative type of discussions, essentially, and so we expected, like we had men involved in the WhatsApp groups or in the intervention to begin with, this would be potentially very likely, and in general that didn't happen. We only had 1 out of 200 cases where that happened, but essentially we did get 2 people getting into a heated argument, and essentially and sort of attacking the video, and so in that particular case, we moderated by essentially like just getting these people out of the WhatsApp group. Importantly, we did allow people not to remain in the group. Essentially, we put them in a group, and they're told that they can leave the group, and sort of that rarely happened. But essentially, that was something that we allowed. And so in that sense, it's all ITT, sort of intention to treat. Essentially, those that were assigned to the group. Although you can imagine that given these figures, there's much of a difference between sort of WhatsApp individual, WhatsApp group, because not much happened within the group. Let me check the time. So I only have 15 minutes left. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay.
Yes, of course. Yes. You could, yeah.
Okay. No, that's bad. Okay. So I'll definitely speed up now. So say so after the intervention, we ran an inline sample, and sort of we have so roughly after. So it was 2 months after, and it took us around a month to get the response. But essentially, like we got a response rate of 75%, which is, given my experience, very large, and and importantly was balanced across different groups. And sort of and all the estimates I'm going to be showing you essentially are ITT estimates. Essentially, we're going to focus on an inline outcome, on indicators of whether you are assigned to Facebook or WhatsApp individual, because we cannot distinguish between the two, or a WhatsApp group, or you are nudged to consume the TV show. We're going to have blood randomization of fixed effects, and we're going to include essentially controls for the base, so essentially for all the baseline cohorts that belong to the family of the outcome that we're focusing on, and everything I'm going to show you essentially has been pre-registered. So okay, I'll skip the summary, but essentially, like, the first thing that we're going to be focusing on, essentially, it has to do with whether like the TV show was actually consumed. And you can, of course, ask people like, hey, did you consume, did you watch this TV show that I assigned you to? And of course, that's not very credible. So we have a host of different outcomes to really like mitigate that concern of demand effects. And I'll be asking people essentially like whether like they watch the TV show sort of at certain time, whether they watch certain TV channels or certain TV show types. Again, we're also gonna ask them like what type of TV shows they watch in general, without prompting them to about the particular NIHA's show. And also importantly, we're gonna ask them beyond like whether they actually watch it or not, then prompt it, and how many shows how many episodes they watch. We're not asking questions that get at the accurate recall of the content and the topics of the TV show. And then we're gonna put everything, all of this, in an index. Importantly, like, very surprising in my experience, absolutely everything I'm going to show you in the indices also shows up in every single outcome that we have. So you can look at our very long table. Essentially, like, I'm going to just be presenting the indices, but essentially the results are extremely robust. You can sort of pick any outcome you want, and you're going to have a very, very similar estimates. For social media consumption, we did like something like fairly similar. And then importantly, we're going to be testing sort of what actually have a factual knowledge of online resources that they can access for women that have been affected by gender-based violence or sexual harassment or assault, and also whether they actually know organizations where they can reach out for support. So aggregate all these variables. Essentially, like, here you have for the index of TV show consumption, here you have the index of social media consumption, and here you have knowledge. And essentially what you see is that you have like roughly close to a 1 standard deviation increase in consumption of TV for the TV treatment, and the social media for the social media treatment. You don't have a 0 for TV, and you don't have a 0 for social media consumption, because remember that for the TV show, we actually had to send some of them their first episodes through social media. So this is likely what's driving that. And also, and there's some sort of spillovers into people that seeing the information on social media and actually watching the show. These are actually like fairly large, sort of like, kind of, if you want to think about it, like first stages. When it comes to sort of more reduced form estimates on like actually whether they learn information, we roughly have between sort of 2 and 0.3 standard, 0.2 and 0.3 standard deviation increase in actual knowledge. So it's fairly sizable, and sort of, and since it's close to 1, some of the reduced form estimates you could think of like as ideal ones. So this is like, this overall suggests actually that we were pretty successful at actually conveying and getting people to consume this information and actually learning something about it. And it was not pretty obvious exactly that we would succeed at that. Essentially, we're talking about context. We're essentially like, you're getting the videos over WhatsApp or Facebook, and it's not that people don't get bombarded by a million other WhatsApp messages or things on Facebook. So in that sense, for us, it was like positive, very positive. So news actually having this first stage, and you know, I think it's going back to Julio's question. I think my biggest question was really like, are we going to succeed at getting the information across, as opposed to whether like we ultimately change what type of outcomes. I think that was like the policy relevant question, sort of. And but for that we needed to be able to communicate the information. So we have, as you can see, this very, very long list of attitudes, precise zeros on here. Essentially, with the scale has been shrinked by a lot. So essentially, otherwise, if it was just one standard deviation, it would be very, very small. But essentially, you have very precise zero effects on attitudes toward gender and marital equalities, zero effects on attitudes toward sexual violence, and we actually had we also allowed them to donate at the very end the end-line payment to our organization, so to measure, you know, actual willingness to pay for these things. And again, all very, very precise estimated zeros. We have and this shows up in every single outcome, attitudinal outcome that we have. There's no effect on no change in attitudes, as again consistent with some of the interventions I discussed at the beginning. What we do see though is that we have an increase in both a hypothetical and recent use of resources. And let me explain a little bit more time what we have here. So first, we're gonna be getting at whether like they have experienced a change in the violence that they experienced. Essentially, we want to look at, you know, reporting. You want to make sure that, you know, we're reporting over the same thing, sort of. And so the first thing we test is that whether they report a change in the violence, domestic and sexual violence that they were exposed to. Then we're going to ask them whether hypothetically they will use these resources. And essentially, the idea might be that, you know, they're not willing to say that themselves have used their resources for social disability concerns or shame. And so we ask them essentially, if someone sort of around you has been exposed to like domestic violence, would you recommend them actually sort of using the online resources, contacting an organization, and also importantly, as I'll discuss in a second, reaching out to the government, reaching out to the police, or reaching out to the family, and which are kind of like placebo outcomes, and which would be pretty just as such. We ask them the same thing about sexual violence for like separately. This is sort of a hypothetical reporting, and you may be shocked, but essentially this is kind of actually the main type of outcome that is asked in most other papers. So usually they focus on hypothetical and not actual reporting. In our case, we actually ask about sort of since we tested, you know, that they actually had factual knowledge of things that we taught them in terms of organizations. Like have they actually reached out to, like, did they look up these organizations, resources for women online, and actually did they reach out to these organizations asking for support? And essentially what you see is that there's no change in the actual violence experience as a result of the intervention. You do see, so pretty much across the board, that everybody's willing to recommend to reach out to these organizations and themselves actually report recent use. And this is, again, all standardized. But something that is very, very telling, actually, now then looking at the numbers, yeah, we have a 7% percentage point increase in actually contacting organizations asking for support relative to a base control mean of 0.03. So essentially, this is roughly more than 100% increase. So still, these are not very large numbers. So, but it's a society where like very few people actually sort of reach out. But essentially, we move a 0.03 control mean to 10%. So this is like fairly sizable sort of estimate. People are actually reaching out to these organizations asking for support. You might have some questions about the social disability of these outcomes, and I'll get to this in a second later. We have like very good placebos to deal with this type of concerns.
Horacio?
Yes, I know I have 6
sorry
minutes.
to interrupt. This is one of the things. So the message on this program was based on religion, or was based on the law of the country?
Based on
so
the law.
It was based on the Quran recommendation.
No.
Or it was
you have to walk the line. So you have to walk the line, because essentially you cannot be anti-religious and actually Nihat herself, you know, it's like she's very religious. But of course, but most of the content was mostly focused sort of like using laws. Both, you know, like so yeah, and so
the country law, yeah.
These are about women's rights, and actually there's a lot of baseline So there'll be some changes in the law, and so there's a lack of knowledge about sort of. I won't get into the details. I have 5 minutes, but essentially, for example,
Okay.
like women don't know essentially that you know they can actually how they can divorce, and they have one particular way of divorcing without providing any explanation and without that being public, and they just don't know that you can actually do that. So, and for example, one of the episodes was around that. It's not that you're pushing women to divorce, and she was very clear. I'm not asking you to do this, but essentially, you know that sometimes it's very hard, and you're being like beaten up, and there's no solution, and the family cannot do anything, and actually you think that it might be a shameful process for you because you have to go to and face a judge and speak out the problems. Actually, there's a way sort of in the Egyptian law that you can divorce without providing a single explanation. For example, that's just one example. Anyway, I'll speed up a little bit. So this is basically like everything has to do with reporting to kind of like NGOs, no? And sort of we also ask the same thing, but for reporting to family members or authorities, they have zero effect. So the effects are really concentrated on this type of like more modern as opposed to traditional institutions. Very quickly, the effects are small. Essentially, we have a 7 percentage point increase relative to, let's say, a 4 control mean. So essentially, it's very tiny effects, but you still have a positive increase in sort of in perspective that they have about like whether like there's going to be more equality between men and women and husband and wife in the future. So in that sense, like there's a bit of a like positive message around that. But again, the magnitudes are fairly small. So to conclude, and I really like, we used a lot of time at the beginning, and I want to allow for some questions for those that prefer to ask them at the end. Essentially, like the main takeaway from this intervention is that it's not we have like entirely new knowledge related to existing work. But essentially, we don't see a big of a change in attitudes. But importantly, not as all of them actually, we do see increased reporting. But the key thing essentially is that we managed to do this totally from afar, exploiting social media relative to all these like heavy foot interventions that they go to a village, like multiple places, and sort of and do this like very massive screening. So subject to the fact that we cannot change sort of attitudes, I think we take it as a very successful way, like model dissemination. And in particular, we highlight like WhatsApp is much more effective, and that we miserably fail in terms of generating social interactions between people over WhatsApp groups. And I think that, and it's an open question on how to do that better. There are some concerns that you might have in terms of the measures, and of course everything's our survey measures. So like, is it just being driven by people telling you what you want to hear? In general, the fact that we don't have any attitudinal shift suggests that that this should not be a huge concern. Essentially, like if actually people were just like telling us whatever we wanted to hear, it would be very easy to tell them like, no, now I think that obviously like sexual harassment is terrible, and sort of, and we don't see that. And importantly, what we have is that we have a pretty good placebo to test it. Essentially, what we do is that we don't only ask them whether they have contacted organizations and went online in the past 2 months, but also we asked at inline about that behavior prior to COVID. And the whole point is that if you did expect, to have the social stability bias, it should be basically manifested in both, like what they said that they did right sort of during COVID time, sort of, but also previously, and you have a very precise zero. And also importantly, like we don't have sort of any differential reporting. Then usually it's a metric that is used in terms of people trying to sort of make the problem more important because you clearly shown that you care about it. In that sense, essentially, we are pretty confident that what we think is like the main relevant on increased knowledge, which you cannot actually fake because we have factual questions, and actually sort of increased reporting are very, very solid measures. In terms of attitudes, you might be concerned that we have ceiling effects, and I can show you the distribution, and it's far from skew. Sort of essentially it's pretty balanced, so you're not seeing those type of effects. So to conclude, in terms of generalizability, the results at the very beginning, I show you how our sample so behaves in terms of covariates relative to the ARA barometer, and sort of here we do the exact same thing but for outcomes. And again, essentially, like you see like a very similar distribution. The big difference is this is baseline. Baseline essentially like this type of people are more likely to engage with organizations, which is I guess why they reached out. Sort of they pay attention to the Facebook sort of ads, and but essentially clearly we still had room improve the knowledge about it and sort of increase reporting. So like just knowing that was not enough. And again, this is very stark. We do have that our sample has been much more subjected to gender-based violence. It's a tricky thing though to square these two things, because essentially the Arab barometer is in person, and so women might not be able to report, and maybe online they're much more willing to report it. So it's kind of hard to make a whole lot of this. But essentially, like we do think that in general we don't have a very different sample. If anything, it's more interested in this type of topics. But this is the type of sample you want to target. That said, what we do is that, and I won't report this, but essentially we look across all our indices, heterogeneous effects by all the covariates I showed you at the beginning, and by all these outcomes essentially, and you see like pretty much not very strong heterogeneous effects. So if you wanted to kind of extrapolate our findings to a more general sample, I think that they would be pretty representative. So even if even though we don't think that's a relevant question, if you wanted to do it, I mean, sort of like we don't think that you see like a very different type of results. But of course, it's kind of hard to do that so external validity sort of claims. Right? And that's pretty much all I have. And I think it's exactly 9:01. I took one more minute than I was supposed to. So if we have some more time, I'm happy to take questions.
Great, Horacio. Thank you so much. So if there are other questions, I have one. So one of the things is, I think that it could be interesting to repeat the experiment, or to try to do it in a, hopefully, in a more normal time, because one of the things that I think that it could be going on is that because of the COVID, I don't know, you may think about, for example, the demand for violence. If the demand for violence become more inelastic, so then you would expect no effect for the intervention. So I think that one of the things is, again, this doesn't mean that the intervention doesn't work. For me, this means that the intervention, well, perhaps is not that effective within a time that perhaps the demand for violence becomes highly inelastic. But again, you need to have to do a similar experiment in a non-pandemic environment.
I cannot agree more. So for sure, it's these are the very specific conditions, and we're just trying to respond to the very specific conditions. But yeah, for sure, and we need to do more. I mean, now I'm in general sort of like, again, this is like my first on these things, and I mean, I worked a lot on like information dissemination for political purposes, which was easy to sort of use for this particular context. I still do think that unfortunately, like, this is not the first pandemic, and this is going to stay here for long, especially in the global south. Like now Africa is spiking and sort of, and yeah, so we're far from where we want to be, and needless to say, Argentina is not doing particularly well, unfortunately. So I'm with you. So although this, I think in itself is relevant, we do want to see essentially how this travels to other contexts. That said, I mean, I do think the big thing. At the end of the day, if you want a like long-term solution, you do need to be able to change attitudes at the communal level, and you need to involve men. And it's not really obvious that you can do this way. So essentially, I do think that when things get better, we can somehow like going the same way as teaching, right? We kind of need to teach in person to, I think it's a very different experience, and I think somehow here, like, these are very sensitive issues, and you do need to. It's a social dynamic, it's a community dynamic. So like we kind of have to go back in person. But yeah, so I fully agree with you. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so Horacio, thank you so much for the great presentation. Well, we learned a lot, and again, this is a great close for the first semester of our JiLAEE seminar. And well, we will be back on the spring of Argentina, the fall of North America. And well, thank you everybody for participating in the seminar, and thank you again, Horacio. And
thank you, I'll say, for the initiative. I think this is fantastic. I'm obviously biased, and this is very. I mean, I guess partly why we're moving to Mexico is to just be closer to Latin America and try to do something from Latin America. So I think it's it's close to my heart that this started in Buenos Aires. So this is great.
Well, thank you so much, Horacio. And well, you know, the doors of JiLAEE are open.
Whenever I can go back, you know, and it's yeah. So I'm actually vaccinated, but you know, we're expecting a child in October, so our third children. So that, I mean, who knows when we'll be able to travel. But for sure, you know, I'll knock on your doors, yeah, whenever possible.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.